EU trade ministers are gathering in Brussels to discuss how to respond to the US president's threat to impose 30% tariffs on EU imports from the 1st of August. The meeting comes after Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, announced that the EU's retaliatory tariffs on US exports will be delayed until August. They were due to come into force on Tuesday, in response, of course, to American import taxes on steel and aluminium. Well, this morning, the EU's Trade Commissioner said that an agreement with the US is very close. Let's speak to our news reporter, Sophia Petitza, who's in Brussels for us. Hi, Sophia. So just talk us through what we're expecting here.
Hi, Lewis. Well, trade ministers are meeting here in Brussels today, and they will try to decide how to respond to Donald Trump's announcement and how tough a line Brussels should take with Washington. Now, the EU is worried about this. We heard from Maroš Šefčovič, the European Commissioner for Trade, this morning, and he said that he regrets Trump's announcement. He's disappointed, and that the idea of a 30% tariff rate would be prohibitive for trade. And there is also some anger here in Brussels because EU officials were blindsided by Trump's announcement. For example, the German MEP who chairs the European Parliament's Trade Committee said that Donald Trump's announcement was impertinent and a slap in the face, especially because both sides had been negotiating for weeks. And there are some European leaders, some countries like France and Germany, who are calling for a tough approach. They are saying that if negotiations fail and if an agreement is not found by the deadline, which is the 1st of August, then the EU should impose countermeasures. We heard today from the Danish foreign minister who was going into the meeting, and he said that if you want peace, you have to be prepared for war. And he thinks that that's where the EU is right now. He thinks Brussels should be prepared to announce countermeasures.
OK, and Sophia, can you just talk us through the mechanics here of the day as far as we know them, if you can still hear me with your earpiece there. Just talk us through what we know about the logistics, mechanics today, any type of formal announcement or not, or when we'll be hearing from any of the people involved to know actually what's being talked about.
Well, what we do know is that Brussels really wants to avoid a trade war because that would affect hundreds of thousands of jobs in the EU. You know, the EU and the US are each other's biggest trading partners. And so that's what Brussels will try to do. There is still hope here that a solution can be found through negotiations. And that's what ministers will try to achieve in the next few days, in the next couple of weeks. But there is a feeling also that Donald Trump's announcement is part of a strategy to put pressure on Brussels. So one of the conversations that EU ministers are having is whether they're willing to contemplate further concessions to Washington. But the reality is that Donald Trump hasn't really spelled out what he wants from Brussels. He's essentially said that the US must have complete open market access to Europe. And the feeling here is that Brussels has already offered plenty to Washington. So at the meeting today, the discussions will be about how to respond, how to de-escalate the situation, not angering Donald Trump, but the reality is that if those tariffs, those 30% tariffs come into effect from the 1st of August, that would really hurt the European Union especially its food and drink sector, for example. And so especially its biggest economies, Germany, France, Italy. And so there is a feeling here that if those tariffs come into effect, the EU will have no choice but to retaliate with countermeasures of its own.
Okay, thank you, Sophia. Well, let's speak now to Professor Marco Simoni, Director of the Observatory on Policy Industry Europe at Luis University in Rome and former economic advisor to 2 Italian prime ministers. Thank you for coming on the programme.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So what do you think those European representatives are going to come up with today?
Well, I don't know what they're going to come up with today. It seems to me that they're a bit missing the point. I'm afraid they didn't read Trump's letter carefully enough, because they are focusing on, everybody's focusing on tariffs, 30%, 20%, 40%. But I think that the real aim of the president is the non-tariff barriers. Like, we should ask ourselves, is this a case of a idiosyncratic president with a weird strategy, or is there a real strategy covered up in a big smokescreen of unconventional behavior? I think the latter is the case.
Okay, what do you mean by non-tariff barriers?
Like, what America really wants to do, or at least a part of it, I think, is to have access to markets that right now they are not open. For example, in the UK, you can't eat American chicken. Now, this could seem like a small thing, but it's not. It's a huge industry. For example, in Europe, you cannot have advertisement for medicines. You can't. And that's one of the reasons why we did not have an opioid crisis like America had, with hundreds of thousands of deaths because of overdoses in opioids-related type of drugs. These are enormous markets that American companies want to access.
But you don't think Europe is suddenly going to turn around and change their regulations and lower their food standards, or change their opinion on advertising for pharmaceuticals?
That is what I think Trump is after. I think that Europe will have to resist, but they have to have, clear in their mind, what is this all about? If they feel offended, as your journalist just said before, because they didn't expect this, it means they're not getting what's going on. It's not like once-off bizarre behavior. It's a strategy. It's a strategy to undermine the European model, and it's very clear.
Okay, just finally, back on the issue of tariffs itself, is there a real danger, as far as you can see, of an escalation here, of a non-resolution and these significant increases in tariffs being imposed?
I think there is a risk of real escalation. I think that would be a mistake. A lot of European products in the US are premium products. Yes, our industry will be hurt if these tariffs are confirmed in the food and pharmaceuticals. They will be hurt, but less than the percentage of tariffs, and part of that will be higher prices for American consumers. I think that Europe shouldn't escalate, because this will definitely bring to a trade war, as any other war, we know when it starts and we don't know how it ends.
Marco Simoni, great to get your analysis. Thank you very much for coming on the programme.
Thank you very much.